Shalom and welcome again to another exciting edition of Torah Watchman Show International Limited Liability Corporation 501c3 company, hosted by none other than your favorite Cardi Jew, Hakam Ya'ar ben-Emmett. I hope everyone has had a wonderful day. God bless you. Thank you so much for my subscribers. Thank you for all the contributors. I invite all feedback. I don't censor anyone unless you're vile and rude. I've not had anyone do that. I had a Muslim person comment on one of my videos. I played fair with him. I gave him factual truth. This is what my name means, truth. And I will promise you, I will teach the truth on the Torah Watchman Show channel on YouTube whenever it's humanly possible. I have exciting content. I have regular Torah lessons, parshas, every single weekly cycle. You'll find that video by that parsha chapter name. I also have exciting videos about Jewish history, about Cardi history, about the difference between Cardiism and Orthodox rabbinism. Yes, and I also talk about the yin and yang, the debates and disputes between Christianity, their implied truth, and the absolute truth of the Jewish people. Listen, I am inviting everyone to come into my channel because you are part of my external Mespoka, my family. You're all welcome with all love and grace and kindness. The same thing I pray to God on my knees every single morning. I say my Shema. I ask my God to give me his loving kindness and grace and mercy. I will promise you I'll give you that extended love and grace and mercy. So help me God. Take care and get excited, get inspired for the next video. Shalom. This is Hakam Ya'ar ben-Emmett here with another exciting edition, Topic of Interest series through the Torah Watchman Show International, LLC. I hope everyone's been well. The title of this video is Like a Lion. No, I'm not talking about Lion King or Simba or anyone else. I'm talking about a passage in the book of Psalms, chapter 22, verse 16. If you're Christian in King James Version Bible, and verse 17, if you have an Art Scroll bilingual Hebrew to English transliteration. Now, as you know, the four Gospels of and then the epistles of Apostle Paul, they have made many unverified and unsupported claims historically about Jesus of Nazareth, not only in their New Testament storytelling, and all those books and letters were actually written much after Jesus' disciples died, but then they built a story plot that Jesus was pre-existent being, like in John, in the beginning. And beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us, and all this in 1 John. But what they're saying is that it's not enough to just simply say the man Jesus was born in Nazareth, Joseph and Mary, and virgin birth or whatever in Bethlehem, the manger and all that stuff, and just leave it at there. He came, lived a short period of time on earth, and then he gave his life for everyone's sins, okay? It's not enough, just their book, but they have to go and monkey with the Jewish Bible. And I don't have to remind you, and I reminded rabbis about this too, and rabbinates, I'm a Cardi Jew, you never ever allowed to add or subtract from the Torah at all. When I say the Torah, I mean the prophets that support the Torah and the sacred writings that support the prophets that support the Torah. So let's get that out right there. We're talking about the Old Testament. Christians named that the Old Testament. A bishop, probably, I don't know, in the Middle Ages sometime, they referred to it as the Old Testament because when they were translating the different sections between Hebrew and Greek and the New Testament versus the Jewish Bible, they were confused. They had thousands of manuscripts. They would say, I'm going to put this in the old stack for, Israel, Moses and the Jewish people, 12 tribes of Israel, what they said to be true. And then on new stack, I'll call it New Testament. Anyway, For example, the piercing of Jesus' hands, according to Christian missionaries today, not according to Apostle Paul or the ambiguous authors that no one knows who wrote the four Gospels, not according to them, because they never referenced this portion in Psalm 22, verse 16 and 17 in the Jewish Bible, that is not accounted for. Actually, in Zechariah, I think it talks about the warning of a false prophet who was actually attacked or beaten or punished or something for his false prophecies. They compared Jesus was there in Zechariah too. Of course, Jesus in Isaiah chapter 53, Jesus revealed all the way back in Genesis into Elohim, the plurality of God, and then we created Adam after our own image or whatever. We this, and it's saying this must be the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Okay. Anyway, got that out. So we're going to begin discussing the book of Psalms, Hebrew Tehillim. Book of Psalms essentially is King David's life story for all the difficult, perilous things that he experienced. But at the end of the day, he never cursed God. And he said God never left him, and God loves him. And I love you, God, no matter what happened. So quickly, King David was a shepherd boy. He was chosen by the prophet Samuel. And as soon after that word got out that their new king of Israel was selected in the time of King Saul, Saul plotted to kill him, even threw a spear at him one time and chased him and tried to kill him. Now, moving forward is that, as he became older, he had other problems. In fact, he was lusting after a married man's wife, Bathsheba, and had that man sent to the front line to combat the Philistine, and he was killed. So he used the law of divorce and that kind of thing there, and married her, essentially abusing his authority as king. Kings get away with all kinds of things, including murder. Well, Prophet Nathan during his time caught him with that, confronted him with that. He probably had a guilty conscience about what happened. He had to. There he was sleeping with another man's wife, and he called her his wife because he desired her and wanted her. Whether she's beautiful or not, I don't know. But I'm saying he's confronted with that sin with a prophet of God, and he fell on his knees. He said, "Please forgive me." But God forgave his soul those sins with no animal sacrifices, Christians. But there were consequences. There's a price to be paid. Even though God may forgive your soul, that does not mean he's going to take away all the life lessons that teach you difficult things that you need to learn from. There's always consequences when you sin. God may forgive your soul, but he will not remove those consequences. Why? Because it's very easy to say, "I'm sorry," and everything turns out perfect in the end if you don't remember the pain and the agony and misery of going through that sinful behavior. Okay, so behind me is Psalms chapter 22, verse 16 from the King James Version. They actually have King James Version only Bible, churches, and pastors say, "I only preach from the King James Version Bible as the most right Bible, more orthodox and everything else." Anyway, the King James Version Bible, I'm using that as an example because it's the most popular Bible that's ever written for Christians, okay? So in 22, verse 16, according to King James Version's translation, ultimately from the Latin Vulgate in the 1600s in England, "For dogs have compassed me, to overwhelm me. The assembly of the wicked have enclosed upon me. They pierced my hands and my feet." Now, automatically, you take something in Hebrew, King David talking about the reality of everyone trying to betray him. His own two sons died in war when they tried to commit treason against him. His best friend was a military leader, like a general, and he betrayed him and allied himself with his sons to overthrow his kingdom. Now, all this happened is that everyone was attacking him. That's how he felt. And at the end of the day, with all the warfare and all the conflict and all the death and everything else, he had too much blood on his hands to be able to even think about building the temple of God. And he lived and dreamed about that since he brought the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh when he was a young king in Jerusalem and positioned it along this area where King Solomon's temple was built, Mount Moriah. Okay, so we have this out. So you see the slide. It talks about pierce my hands and my feet. So if it says this in English, and you know it's translated from Hebrew, you assume that Hebrew would say the same thing. Not necessarily. So this verse, they pierced my hands and feet, was added by Gentile authors, probably I would say the 2nd century, and other manuscripts and things like that. But it was actually published as such in Anglo-Saxon English from the Latin Vulgate by 1611. There were no Jews in England at that time; they were all exiled. They actually got on ships and went to the Americas. My ancestors were among those. However, King David, who authored the book of Psalms, was talking about how his enemies sought his death, his destruction, attacking him and things like this. That's why he wrote what he wrote about like a lion attacks your hands and feet. Everyone knows the visual imagery of a savage lion in the wild attacking its prey. Okay? Now, I mentioned to you his 2 sons committed treachery against him. All of this going on, all this adversarial forces, but he's never lost his faith in his Jehovah God, as is Ezra, as is hell. So we now know how it feels when you're attacked by all sides. The whole book of Psalms quickly defines what it means to be a human, humanity in itself, dealing with difficult struggles, all kinds of stress factors, things of this nature. But your faith gets you through to the test, right? You say that Abraham was tested, but King David was definitely tested. And close to the end of his life, God said to the prophets, he sinned no more. And still, King David never stopped being a friend of God. God referred to King David as his friend, but he was not allowed to build the temple. He got the blueprints together, got the supplies, initial things, but only his son Solomon was allowed to do that because all the blood on his hands from battle and war, he's actually was a king that actually was defending his nation against the Amalekites and Philistines and Canaanites and all of that. He had so much blood in his hands. This at some point has to wear on your psyche, your psychology, and just oppress you so much in the situation of oppression and things of that nature that he never, ever gave up his faith. Now, behind me, you'll see the proper word for word Hebrew to English translation. Now, it's verse 17, and it's a ArtScroll Jewish Bible where you have bilingual transliterated text from Hebrew to English. It's verse 16 again in your favorite King James Version Bible. Now, what it actually says, for dogs have encompassed me, and you fear dogs as enemies and people, underlings are like that. Not talking about real animals, these are all metaphors. A company of evildoers, okay? They have an organization, association, affinity, or say, we want to do one thing together. We want to take out this person, So they have enclosed themselves around them, like for instance, Indians surrounding a group of wagons and things like that. You've seen Old Western and things like this. This is how King David was thinking. They had all these adversarial forces surrounding him, trying to take advantage of him, trying to take his throne away, all this. Now, he uses this phrase here, like a lion. Now, in Hebrew, this is pronounced with a ka'ari, which essentially means like a lion, and ari, of course, is lion. They are at my hands and my feet. And the arrow pointing to hands in to Ka'ari, try to look at these Hebrew characters, because I'm going to be breaking that out and explain to you what Christian missionaries are actually doing right now, namely on YouTube. Now, this is not a news flash, but Christians love to wordsmith the Bible freely. They don't care. They don't care if Moses says you are never ever to add or subtract from the Torah. This forbidden is an abomination against God. They don't care. When they do things in secret like this, like in monasteries in the Middle Ages and all this, they could monkey with the verses. They could change the manuscripts around, add lines, subtract lines, and all this stuff. And it's historical evidence of what I'm saying. I'm not making a broad brush indictment and not stereotyping anyone. But this is called, in my mind, a straw man argument. In other words, something that's weakly standing with lack of evidence. It is caused to stand on salacious things, made up things. In other words, if Jesus actually inspired authors of the New Testament, and Jesus is God, and why wasn't that enough? Why do you have to go back in my Bible, monkey with it, add and change it, subtract, remove things, change manuscripts around, make it look Christological, like going from like a lion attacking my hands and my feet, and then calling that as piercing my hands and feet, like crucifixion on the cross. Why they have to do that? Because there's a weak argument to say Jesus was what he says he was, because the Gospels and epistles of Apostle Paul, even the book of Revelation, the Elder John, they were all written decades, if not nearly 100 years after these people lived. Jesus and the disciples were all dead by the time Apostle Paul wrote his first letter to Ephesus. That's what I'm talking about here. Now, this is also known that even though the Old Testament or the Jewish Bible does not support directly, like the triune Godhead, the Trinity, that John 3:16, you don't find it in the Jewish Bible, they're way out of that argument and debating in apologetics, is that they call it progressive revelation. They have the license to say, well, God later on revealed this and explained it to Christians and Christian pastors and priests and scholars of the Christian Bible, revealed to them iteratively far in the future. That's what they say. And I already did a video about this. Now, look carefully at the Hebrew word here for ka'ari. Ka'ari. It is again, ari is lion, ka'ari is like a lion. So anyone with an elementary level of understanding the English language knows what the word like means. It's a metaphor. It means it's not is something directly, but it's like something that you can reference in your mind that you've seen before. Okay? And like this person robbed the bank, right? That's more direct there. Well, this person acts like he robbed the bank because he looks guilty. That's what I'm talking about. I don't have to take you to grade school to teach you this. But, the whole idea of a lion, a bear, a savage animal like that, attacking you. You see how they attack antelopes in Africa, how they run them down and everything else. They literally put all four claws from the paws, the four legs, into the flesh of that animal. This is how King David felt at that time. But the phrase was what Christian, and I'm talking about contemporary Christian, contemporary missionaries have made this up. So what they had to do, they had to prove to their listening audience in churches and on TV and videos that this word was actually intended to be pierced and not like a lion. So ka'ari was something else, okay? So I'll get to this in a moment, what they found in Qumran caves, an ancient manuscript. So the next slide I have here is a word ka'ari, okay, from Psalm 22:16. This is what the consonants look like. I'm not including any vowels. I'm pronouncing it as correctly as I can. There's no Masoretic text translation. For anyone that doesn't know, if you know Noahides or Christians out there, Jews knows what it is. Masoretic text essentially is our oral tradition of how the ancient Hebrew was once pronounced. Okay, and it was handed down, and it was actually in early manuscripts, and like the Dead Sea Scroll and things like that, in the Qumran caves along the Dead Sea and those cliffs, when they discovered these fragments, it actually had dots and strokes and things and symbols there for pronunciation accenting. Okay, so ancient Hebrew just used consonants, but over a period of time, people had helping tips added to those consonants for vowels. Now, look at the last letter of the word ka'ari here. You see now a yod changed to a vav, and this example of altering Hebrew words and trying to change their meaning. All you have to do is drop an aleph out, and the word completely changes to something else, or just nonsense, gibberish. Now, in the desperate effort by Christians, some Christians, of wordsmithing, they drop the aleph to form an unrelated word. They experiment with Hebrew text until they get the right thing, and then act like it always existed, and rabbis have been hiding all along. They have heard him say that. So they make a word like karu, which means to excavate or to dig. They were trying to make a word very similar to piercing without changing too much of Hebrew text and without revealing what they were doing behind the scenes, whitewashing and things like this. They did not want to remove the word completely per se, that that like a lion, but they changed it to pierced, but they used the word in the end that actually in Hebrew means to excavate, like an archaeological dig per se, and dig in the ground, not pierce. Now, their attempt to form the word for pierce. Also notice the character for the yod is replaced with a vav. Okay, so in this example, ka'aru does not mean anything. Okay, now there's other words I'm going to show you in a moment for like the Hebrew word for excavate, and it's actually karu, not ka'aru. Okay. Now, interestingly, if you think, hey, you're ben-Emmett, you're really rough on Christians, why should I trust you more than my missionary, my pastor? Well, the same English text translated from Hebrew is found like a lion in the book of Isaiah, chapter 38, verse 13, back here behind me in the King James Version Bible. Doesn't matter what Christian Bible you choose. New International Version, whatever you want, New World Translation, whatever. It will say the same thing, like a lion. So essentially says that you're breaking my bones, you're at me at night and day, and you're trying to bring the end to me using something savage like a lion to describe what the prophet Isaiah was talking about, from morning to evening, these kind of adversarial forces are surrounding me. So there's a metaphor. So since many Christians have accused Jews of changing our text to hide evidence of Jesus, like for instance, when you read the Haftarahs, in other words, the ending prophet or section or found in the Judges or the King, First and Second Kings, that kind of thing, historically, we started reading Haftarahs since the time of Judah Maccabee, and they may say, why don't you read Isaiah 53 in your synagogue morning services after you read the Torah Parsha, the Torah lesson, weekly lesson there? Because Isaiah 53 does not address what that Torah Parsha is. When we were forbidden by elements in the Greek Empire at that time, during the time of Judah Maccabee, leading up to that war there, we got away with reading the prophets instead of reading 5 books of the Torah. Now, to show you here an example of badly written Hebrew text, it's a fragment. And this fragment is known as Noahides, and it's actually dates between 70 CE and 135 CE. 70 CE, of course, King Herod's temple was destroyed. 135 CE was the great revolt of Zionists in Judea that led to destruction of Jerusalem. So someone hiding out in the Qumran caves scribbled this text here, copying information maybe from a fragment that's even worse shape, copying it to a new fragment. It was probably a parchment, like a scroll, but all was left after nearly 2,000 years ago. It's just a smeared out text, and I'll show you here. Now, I've highlighted a couple letters here that they think that is Yod. Now, this is the same passage here that I just read you in Psalm 22, verse 17 in Hebrew, okay? In those chapter breakouts, which is artificial anyway. The original scrolls did not have these chapter breakouts. Anyway, for ease of use, pointing out. So notice the Hebrew text on top of the slide here is that it says Ka'ari, but it also even though if the Yod was not the Yod, because listen, there were grammatical and spelling mistakes in here. We know what the author was trying to put in here because there was an olive there. You know, the olive is not dropped out. So the attempt of modern Christians and missionaries and other people, Bible students, to add and subtract things from my Bible and even delete lines of text and adding a line that was not there, and then trying to go back and reverse engineer this badly rendered fragment that I showed you a moment ago, it's just proof that they're doing everything they can, very insidiously, very cleverly, trying to go and behind your back and knifing of the Holy Scriptures and trying to prove that Jesus was being talked about in their Old Testament when it was never the case. Okay, so in conclusion, what do you think about this? Okay, now I've presented you, if you're Christian or Noahide or a Jew and you have access to a Christian Bible. If you don't, I don't have any Christian Bibles in my Judaica library, but you can go on the web and search that. If you go right now on Google and type in Psalms 22, verse 16, you'll get image. You go to images on Google, you'll see pictures of the same scripture here that essentially says, is talking about piercing hands and feet. However, not all Christian Bibles are the same in the way they translate text. Some of them are more honest than others, and they do not say that. They have like a lion at my hands and feet, like King David was trying to say. Listen, King David not mean to call all this firestorm of debates and disputes in his time. It simply was talking about his life at that time, and we can identify with suffering. You know, the book of Psalms is the core of every Siddur, even Carta Jews, Orthodox Jews, whatever. You know, the Psalms is probably the highest percentage of book that's in our prayer books. That because when we are down and out and we feel horrible, we sin, we said something we shouldn't say to someone, we hurt someone's feeling, or we say something is true, we just lied, or spreading malicious gossip. Well, we go back to King David, and he said, well, he committed adultery, but he was forgiven and still loved God, and God never stopped loving him and never stopped holding his hand. I think that's the optimism we should walk away from this video. It's very important. I encourage you to learn Hebrew. Take a college course. There's a lot of free YouTubes about learning Hebrew. You can order books on Amazon, translated text and things like that. If you want to learn Hebrew, the character set is not that complicated. It may seem too complicated. It's harder for a person my age to learn a foreign language if you're not born with it, But I'm just saying is that learning that beautiful, sweet language will help you to understand the true meaning of the intent of the original authors, which were the prophets of God. Okay? If you translate that into another language in English, it's like kissing God through a towel. And it does not give justice to someone like King David, who suffered and so much in his life and his marriages and children and everything else, going through all of this to the end for people like a cult
like other groups out there, to take something out of context and mangle the text. And listen, there's no history of cults in Judaism, to my knowledge. There's a lot of history of cults in Christianity. I already talked about this before, I'm not going to go down there. But I'm saying if you have authority and you suppress your congregation and treat them like idiots, and you go and create a story narrative that was never the intent of the author, you just establish a cult. You really have. And that's what I'm trying to avoid here. Listen, I just gave you one simple example, Psalm chapter 22, verse 16 in your Christian Bible, verse 17, and a Hebrew transliterated Bible to English. How one line of text radically changed the entire author's intent. Taking away just one consonant that could change the entire meaning of a word. They try to do this from that Hebrew text I showed you. They try to do this to show that rabbis are trying to hide the real text, that Jesus is there all the time, but they hid it, and then they rewrote their Bibles and changed the text. No. Listen, Rabbi Hakam, believe me, they handwrite this. They don't run it through laser printers or all that. They handwrite this, and they would rather die than intentionally make a mistake. The whole thing has to be thrown out if you make too many mistakes and copying a Torah to another Torah. That's just the way it is. Anyway, this is Hakam Yara ben-Emmett signing out until the next time. I love you. Take care. God bless you.
If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.